All right, so for midterm practice day number 3, you are going to be able to just use your calculator for this problem. It's not a big deal, but since I don't have one right now, I'll just show you what it looks like to do it by hand. But please get your calculator, 16 to the power of 3/4, and you're good. Okay? So this is what it would look like, though, if you don't do it that way. It'll be the 4th root of 16 to the 3rd. Okay, the 4th root of 16. So what number do I multiply times itself 4 times to get 16? Well, it's 2. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. So that's going to be 2 to the 3rd, which is 8. And you're done. Again, your calculator does it really fast, right? So you don't have to worry about doing it by hand. But if you have to do it by hand, this is how it's going to look. Same for number 18. Okay, remember guys, this is all Friday's midterm. Don't forget, if you weren't here yesterday, we got to number 13. 13 on the review. 13, 14, 15, 16, now 17, 18. Those are all day 2, Fridays. Okay, that's when you should start your second cheat sheet, right? If you want to, you don't have to. So right here, 8 to the 5/3, if I do it by hand, it's the cubed root of 8 to the 5th. Okay, so cubed root of 8 is 2, and 2 to the 5th, that's 32. And again, your calculator can do this for you, so you don't have to worry about doing it by hand. Number 19, though, you're going to have to do by hand. Well, not all of it, but some of it. But we learned a cool little trick for these types of problems. When you have powers that are exponents, you can, when you have powers that are fractions, or powers being raised to powers, there's ways we take care of that. So let me show you. The property says if you have x to the n raised to the m, it's x to the n times m. In other words, multiply them. And then, if you have a negative power, you can rewrite it as 1 over x to the positive of that power. Those are the two things we need for this problem right here. Okay? So anything to a negative power, flip it over and then turn the power positive. So this is what it's going to look like. First off, let me use this little identity here, the first one right there. I'm going to distribute that power to both of those terms. So that's going to be 8 to the negative 1/3, x to the 6th to the negative 1/3. Okay, so I'm using that first property right there to distribute that power. Now I'm going to rewrite 8 to the 1/3. That's 1 over 8 to the 1/3. So 8 to the negative 1/3, is 1 over 8 to the 1/3. And right there you could use your calculator for that, because that's the cubed root of 8. Okay? And then this next one is 1 over x to the 6th to the 1/3. Note, that's the second little identity I showed you guys, right? This is what you do with negative powers. You flip them over, you make their powers positive. So if you go to your calculator and type in 8 to the 1/3, it's going to give you a 2. So this becomes half times, and then a power to a power is a product, right? So 6 times 1/3, what is that? What's 6 times 1/3? 2. Right? Because 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2. So your answer, your final answer, is going to be 1 over 2x squared. All right, so looking at number 20, like surprisingly, maybe we should do 21 first, if you guys don't mind. That one's a little easier to kind of warm us up to these problems. Let's do 21, and then we'll go back up to 20. It doesn't matter the order, as long as we cover it. The reason why I want to do 21, maybe we'll do 21 and 22. is because those do not end up with any square terms, so they're easier. When you get the square terms, that's usually going to result in a trinomial, which means you got to factor it and check your answers. But if you don't have any square terms, the check step doesn't matter. Okay? So for number 21, if I'm solving for b, funny enough, yesterday, I forgot what period it was. I think it was 5th period. As some kids were walking out, they were going to their next period. They're like, I hope we have a lot of these square root ones. Those are fun. And I didn't say that. That was a student. I was kind of like chuckling on the inside. I'm like, oh, that's funny. That's what I say. But I don't know if you guys see them as fun, but that person definitely liked it. So we're going to, what do we do to get rid of a square root? We square, right? We got to square both sides. So I'm going to square and square. So on the left side, it's just going to be b minus 5. And on the right side, it's going to be 100. So I'll add 5 to the right, and then I'm done. So it'll just be b equals 105. That's it. So that's pretty easy. We'll do number 22 because that one's also pretty much just as simple. It requires a little bit more work, but not anything more complicated. But that's pretty easy. Now, you're supposed to check to see if your answer works. But if I don't have a b squared, chances that it doesn't work are like infinitely small. So you don't have to check these. Not these. Check the ones that have square terms. So those will be coming up soon. Okay? But this one's fine. You don't have to do a check step. Let's look at number 22. Just because it looks more difficult doesn't mean we have to do anything different. We're going to still take a square of both sides. So we'll square both sides. When I square both sides, I get 2x minus 6, 5x minus 15, sorry, not 14, 15. And then I get to combine my terms. So let me get my 2x, I'm going to move it over to the right side. So that positive 2x becomes a minus 2x. So 5x minus 2x is 3x. This will be negative 6 equal to 3x minus 15. And then I'll get that negative 15 and I'll add it over to the left side. So it becomes negative 6 plus 15. That's 9. All right, this is going to go that way. So that means x is equal to 3. Remember, on quizzes, you don't have to write x equals 3. If it's a fill in the blank, just type in 3 and move on. Okay? Are we okay with those two? Those are the easier ones. Okay? They don't require me to do any check stepping. I don't have to do any factoring using the x method. Nothing like that. Okay? But the questions like 21 and 24, yeah. So we'll start easier. 20. Not to say this is easy, but easier. Oops. I don't know what I did there, but there you go. So the square root of 12 minus n is equal to n. I'm going to do the same thing. I want to eliminate my square roots. Okay? In doing so, I'm going to square both sides. So this is 12 minus n is equal to n squared. That's when the problems occur, okay? Or maybe not problems, but that's when the problem gets a little bit more difficult because there's an n squared term now. That means that I can probably factor it either using binomial factoring by finding the greatest common factor, or by doing x method. Okay, there's a lot of different ways we can factor. But in this case, I'm going to have 3 terms. I'm going to move the negative n over and the positive 12 over. And it's going to look like this. 0 equals to n squared plus n minus 12. Okay? So, when I look at this thing, I see 3 terms. That means I'm probably going to have to use an x method. So let's see. My a is 1, my b is 1, my c is negative 12. So this will be negative 12 and a 1 for my x, right? Because a times c is negative 12, and my b value is a 1. Two numbers that multiply to negative 12 that add up to 1. 3 and a 4, which one's positive? The 4? Okay. So these will work. So I'm going to kind of carry my work this way here. I'm going to get n minus 3, n plus 4 equals to 0. Now I'm going to solve both of them. What are my two answers? N equals, or maybe I'll show you one extra step and then we'll do the answers. I heard some of you guys say them, so that's okay. But yeah, n equals 3 and n equals negative 4. So good, you got your answers. But remember, whenever you're doing square roots, you should always check your work if you have squared terms. Right? I didn't check them in the other two because they're linear. Those have to work. These don't have to. So let's see. If I plug in a 3, I'm going to change my color here for checking it. Okay, this is my check step. 12 minus n equals to n. So I plug in a 3, I get the square root of 12 minus 3 equals 3. That's the square root of 9 equals 3. 3 equals 3. That checks out just fine. Now let's try a negative 4. So square root of 12 minus negative 4 is equal to negative 4. Square root of 16 is equal to negative 4. So 4 equals negative 4. That's not true. So you only have one answer. You don't have to show check steps. Again, this is multiple choice. You don't have to show any work, but why does the n turn positive? You mean right here? Oh, right here? So remember the little saying I say, when you switch sides, you switch signs? So when I went from left to right, the negative n will become a plus, and the positive 12 will become a minus. You can either do that, or you can put plus n on both sides. I'm trying to save space and time. So I would just draw arrows and just remember, change the sign when it goes to this. If I would have moved n squared to the left, then it would be a negative n squared minus n plus 12, and you'd have to factor out the negative first. Because remember, it can't be negative in the front of when you start factoring. So you have to factor the negative out first, and then you got to do it. It can create a bit of a mess. So that's one of the reasons why you always notice I like to keep my variables positive, right? I always like to move the smaller variable to the other side to keep everything positive because it creates less problem. I mean, I know how to do the work if it's negative, but if I can avoid it, I'll avoid it, right? Just like with fractions. If I can avoid fractions, I'll avoid fractions because I know how to deal with them, but why deal with them if I can avoid it, right? Decimals, all that stuff. So, but yeah, so we checked it. We saw only one work. There you go. Again, this is the easier one. The reason why we call it easier is because we have some that look like this. Now, I didn't see, unless I'm wrong, so I would recommend you maybe include one in your work. But I didn't see any of the problems that that had like a n minus 6 on one side, and when you square it, you got like a trinomial because you distributed, like the really hard ones. I didn't see any of those. Unless you decide to change it, then they're not there, like the really, really tough ones. Okay? So if I were you, though, maybe I'd include one just to make sure. And I'll show you what I mean after we're done with this. Okay? So I know I want to get the square root all by itself. Okay? But I have to get rid of that minus 8 in front of it. Now the minus 8 is multiplying it. So if it's multiplying it, I have to divide both sides by negative 8. So I'm going to divide, whoops, let me change that to red here. Divide this by negative 8. Divide this by negative 8. So I get the square root of x minus 5 equals to 2. At that point, I'll square both sides. So square and square, I get x minus 5 equals to 4. Now just move the negative 5 over, right? Let's add 5 to the right side. So 4 plus 5 is 9. So there's my answer. Should I check this one? I don't have to because the term is linear, right? The x is not a squared term, it's a first term. So So you don't have to check it. It'll work. And if you want to, go ahead. Plug in a 9 to the equation. 9 minus 5 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. It works. Okay? So when it's linear, it's fine. If we have x to the first only. But when you have x squared, please check. Okay? And that's it. Now, the ones like I told you guys that I didn't include here, and I would have not included it out of like laziness. I would have not said like, I'm not doing that. I don't feel like doing it. I would have definitely included hard problems. Are the ones that look like this. Let me go to, let me see. Oh no, it wasn't these. It was before that. These. Okay, the ones where you had like a number and a letter, and then you had to move the number over, and then when you squared it, you had to do distribution, and then you just had this big old mess, right? So like right here's the distribution part, and then you have this big mess that you got to start like organizing, and then eventually you organize it, then you had to factor it, right? Like it was a lot of work, okay? I didn't include any of those, and I think the reason why is because they don't show up. But if I were you, just in case somebody decides to change the test, it won't be me. But if someone decides to do it, go back to section, what is this, 6.8, okay? And you don't have to copy like example 1, because we did one like example 1, or 2, but like maybe example 3, okay? Or maybe example 4. This is the one that we did, that we looked at first. But maybe one of those, copy it down, just in case. All right? But I don't expect there to be one like this, because or else I would have had you guys practice one with me. Okay?